Hi, I'm Tanya Tompkins,
And I'm Millicent Tompkins.
and we're here to talk about music and
Art.
growing up in a household with you as my mother and watching you do all the artistic activities that you've done throughout the time that I've known you has been incredibly inspiring. And I want to thank you for supporting me the whole way through to be a musician and kind of telling me that art and beautiful things is very important in this world and that that's something that's kept you going in your life. Is that true?
True. It's absolutely true. I just think of that word beauty, and I think a broad concept of my idea of beauty has brought me through my whole life.
Yeah, and you helped
I
me
like
with
it.
that also.
Yeah.
So also you were a singer, and I heard you warming up a lot as a child. And
Always vocalizing.
right, and I know that you worked really hard on that. And at a certain point, it seems to me like you made a decision to make painting your priority over music. Is that
That
right?
was because of my age and us having a little trouble with the placement of my voice in my 50s. And then I thought, oh, well, you don't sing much past that anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So I just decided to focus on art. And in fact, well, when you get older, you can't particularly sing well. I mean, I've heard people sing fairly well in their 60s, but not much beyond.
Mm-hmm.
And so I could focus on art as I got less and less energy.
Well, I remember you used to tell me about Matisse and how he was so old and he would be lying in bed in the hospital and he found those cutouts to do.
That's
and
right.
you were very inspired by that. And now here you're 83 and you're going great guns and everybody's really impressed with you, as am I. I think it's a great way to get older, and you've been a really good model for getting old and staying interested in life and in what you're doing.
Well, I thought when I was about 70, well, maybe I'm supposed to retire now
Mm-hmm.
because people retire when they get older. And I thought about that a little bit in the back of my mind for a few years. And I thought, well, what on earth would I do if I didn't paint? And in fact, I feel the happiest when I'm painting. And one time I ran into two of my Buddhist friends, and they both looked at me and I said, well, I wasn't actually attending or meditating now. And they said, oh, well, Millicent, they both said it. Your art is your meditation. And that's absolutely true because I feel centered in, so far, I know exactly what I'm doing and I like to do it. And I like the challenges. And it's a marvelous thing. I think I can remember they put a paintbrush in Renoir's hand, his bandaged hand. I think he must have had terrible arthritis, and I have pretty bad arthritis myself. Not that bad, but he went right on painting those beautiful sensual nudes of these beautiful females, and he was ancient. But he did comment at one point that that was a type of sexual energy,
The painting.
the artistic expression, which I think certainly must have a great deal of truth in it.
Well, it seems to me that your paintings have gotten more and more sort of in a spiritual direction. Do you think that's
That's
true?
a funny phenomenon because maybe I am sort of spiritual because I studied Buddhism and I like it very well. But I noticed that my whole series that I did before this present series, which is about 15 or 20 years, was the Cloud Window series. And I didn't really understand that when I was doing it. I don't remember how many I made, about 14 or 15 or something. Big oil paintings of still life and an ascending drape on the table. And then in the window, the clouds. And then when I got all finished with it, I remembered the Buddhist phrase, that would have been closer to when I studied in the 80s, was form is emptiness and emptiness is form. And it's kind of like the yin and the yang. Well, it's the earthly and the terrestrial and the spiritual. And the one is moving toward the other. So I would always have some fruits or things of the earth ascending. and I didn't really figure all that out until I finished the whole series, you know.
Mhm.
You don't. You just paint what you paint, and then you think about it.
Mhm.
But the most recent thing I painted, I was thinking about the 75th anniversary of the Golden Gate Bridge, and I thought, that's my history. I used to go to Baker Beach when I was in high school in San Francisco. I was born here. And so then I thought, I'm not getting any younger. I better paint the Golden Gate Bridge.
Mhm.
So I did 3 big paintings of it. I had my former assistant with me from Italy, and that was very helpful because all my paintings have to be laid out carefully and taped and so on and so on. And so I made those 3 paintings. And then I put all the predellas, that's what they call all those little pictures on the side in the main picture.
Mhm.
In the Renaissance, they called them predellas. And so I have all the history. I have Sir Francis Drake and Lieutenant Ayala,
Mhm.
who came into the harbor for the first time
Mhm.
of anybody, 200 years after Drake passed the harbor. Isn't that interesting? Those crummy old boats, it took them 200 years to come and go in there. And then the Mission Dolores, the first building, along with the Presidio and all the rest. And I watched them put up the other bridge from my father's house, up from the Castro. And I could see in his telescope them putting it up. And that was in the 30s when I was a little girl. And he took me from the first day the Golden Gate Bridge was open, he took me on a walk on there. So I was about 6 or 7 or something like that. So I thought, good to paint it. And then I entered one in the Marin County Fair, and I don't usually enter very many shows or anything. And then I got first prize in fine art, so I was very pleased.
Recently or when?
Yeah, this summer,
Oh, okay.
2012 Marin County Fair.
Okay.
So that was fun, and we'll see.
So, when you were doing both art and music at the same time in full force, I remember you telling me, because I was too young to remember, but we were living in France and I was just a baby.
You were a really little baby.
Yeah,
You're
and-
learning to walk.
And Leslie was 4. And I think you gave a show there of your paintings and you were studying singing with Debussy's student, is that right?
Not his student, his colleague.
Oh.
That was fabulous. She was 85 at the time, Jean Bartoli, and I liked this French repertoire especially. And the people at the conservatory said, "Who?" I said, "Who should I study with?" And they said, "Oh, we'll go to Jean Bartoli." And she up 5 stories in the 5e arrondissement. And she's playing the piano and teaching me the Chanson Bilitis of Debussy. And she's saying, "Oh, we were all so mad at Debussy when he left his beautiful young wife and married that older woman with all the money." And she knew him, and she knew Ravel. And I was studying the Scheherazade of Ravel with her, and she was playing it away on that old upright piano. And she said to me, she said, when Ravel finished writing Scheherazade, he didn't call me, I don't know if they had telephones, whatever. He came here, and I was famous for déchiffrage. She could sight read anything, and she could sight sing anything too. And so she played it and sang it for him the first time. And then she said we practiced it all afternoon, and then we took it to somebody's salon to present it for the first time. Isn't that moving? And link with Ravel and link with Debussy. I don't know. I must have been in my 30s. Of course I was, because you were an infant.
Well, so being in your 30s and having an infant and a 4-year-old, what I want to know is I've watched my friends have little children.
A little bit difficult.
And they don't seem to be able to do anything else while the children are little. And here you were living in another country and you were giving an art show and you were studying singing.
That's part of the explanation. I had a girl living with us in France, like an au pair, Colette. And she watched out for us and for the babies. And she helped with everything. And she cooked a dinner. And so I could go off to Paris, it was half an hour away, and have my singing lesson and come home. And we had a piano in the house in Gif-sur-Yvette. and I could practice while your kids were playing,
Mm-hmm.
and I could make paintings when I felt like it.
And it probably worked out pretty well that Dad was kind of a workaholic.
Yeah, he was at work the whole time.
Yeah.
But we had fun because the scientists were very interesting. We could have nice dinners and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you had a really active social life as well, all throughout.
Now I remember how I painted when we got home,
Mm-hmm.
because Colette only stayed a little while, and then that was the end of that kind of help,
Mm-hmm.
which is rather critical, actually. But I remember I had a babysitter, an elderly lady, 3 mornings a week for 2 hours each time. And I always tell young artists, so Leslie, your older sister, would stand about this high or wherever she was at that time at the top of the stairs at the baby fence crying for me to come back. Then I would go downstairs and I'd go in the bedroom down there and close the door. And my brain knew I had that 2 hours to paint in.
Mm-hmm.
And I just learned, I just started right in.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had 6 hours. But my brain knew I had 6 hours a week.
Mm-hmm.
And I made my best early semi-abstract paintings at that time.
Mm-hmm.
You could tell the subject matter, but they were semi-abstract.
Mm-hmm.
But so I always tell that to young artists. Just have a schedule and your brain will know, like when you go to practice all the time. I don't think you waste much time when you get in there. You tune your instrument and start in.
Mm-hmm.
It works.
Yeah. So, how do you think being a musician influenced your painting, if it did at all?
Well, in these most recent years, it does influence it a lot. Well, because the most recent thing I'm doing is painting adaptations from the great masters on harpsichord lids.
Mm-hmm.
And there's my daughter Tanya and all the Baroque musicians surrounding everything, and you and me and other musicians, and my singing repertoire. Because about 15 or 20 years ago or something like that, I saw an Edward Hicks painting, and he is very early American Quaker, and he put signs all around the edge of his paintings with Christian messages, because the Quakers wouldn't let him paint anything but Christian subjects. Right. He painted the Peaceable Kingdom,
Mm-hmm.
and it's the animals and all that, and some angels, rather primitively rendered, and then in the background there was Penn signing a treaty with the Indians, and that was perfectly rendered, very realistic.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, oh God, this is really funny. It's like me, because I started to put poetry around the edges of my paintings, and I also started to quote extensively from the great masters, just
Mm-hmm.
like Hicks did with that etching that he picked up somewhere of Penn
Mm-hmm.
and the Indians. And so I got a whole thing going like that. And so I was quoting quite often some of the poetry from my vocal repertoire.
Right. Oh, I see. So that would be the link to music.
The music, yeah.
And doing the harpsichord lids.
And also in the 70s and 80s, I did about 150 drawings, freehand ink drawings of all our instruments.
Mm-hmm.
Your cello, your youthful cello,
Mm-hmm.
and Leslie's violin, and Gordon's flute, and God knows what. And also I went to music sources, and I drew a lot of those early instruments. And by that time I'd learned to put a little color in an ink drawing. So, and I would also put the scores in. I put it on the music stand in one of those drawings, and it was very worn, because I studied that hard.
Mm-hmm. And you do seem influenced by poetry, because you were telling me that last night you heard Les Illuminations of Britain.
Yeah.
And you were inspired by this poem, I think. Or did this have something to do with something that was on one of your paintings?
Yes.
Okay, so I don't understand.
This is Rimbaud and the fabulous imagery in Les Illuminations. And I used to sing a few of those songs, but I didn't have enough of a gift to sing the whole cycle.
Of Britain.
Like I heard last night.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was amazing. And it said, When the crimson hangings were draped over the houses, and all one afternoon, while they advanced toward the palm gardens, they were indeed kings. And I thought, so beautiful. And so I made a painting where I'm quoting Gozzoli, 1575, and he has got a picture of Lorenzo de' Medici as a young man sitting on a beautifully adorned horse with his entourage, and they're proceeding. And so I put some palm trees in the background, and then I put that poetry around the edges, and it ends, they were indeed kings. Isn't that wonderful? I mean, all the imagery is bouncing off each other, and that's what I like so much.
And so then doing the harpsichord paintings is a real link between your art and your love for music, and now your painting is on Hanukkah's harpsichord, and that's going to be shown as part of their series of Voices of Music soon.
Right.
Yeah.
November 17th at St. Mark's.
You've done some other harpsichord lids as well, like for...
Oh, the first one I did, Kevin Fryer, the harpsichord maker, heard about me through your friend that used to assist me in the studio, Maria.
Right.
And he said, now I need somebody to paint this painting on this lid for Jacques Ogg in Holland. And she said, oh, well, I think Millicent would like to do that, you know? And so then they brought me the painting, which was Orpheus Charming the Animals. Sensational painting by Kaup, which visited San Francisco recently in that Flemish collection. And he's playing his instrument, the violin, on your arm. Arca di Braccio or something like that. Anyway, and all the exotic animals are standing around. So then I know how to use Xerox, which an artist back east taught me. And I reversed it, of course, and added. I have to add a lot because it goes out 7.5 feet to a little place like this, and it started out like that. And then you have to get onto the horizon, because that shape distorts the horizon. So you think, wait a minute, where is the horizon? You know. And so that was the first one I painted, and I had my assistant of the time helping me. And I laid out Xeroxes all over the whole thing to plan the composition. And it was hard to do, and I think it took about 3 months or something like that. But I really enjoyed it. And then Kevin had me do a second after Vernet, which was Calm Sea in the Moonlight. Beautiful figure standing by a fire on the edge of the shore, and the 18th century French ships with that incredibly complex rigging. We had no idea where one rope starts, but where it finishes is the question. And there's a million of them on there, you know.
So whose harpsichord is that?
That's Kevin's.
Oh, okay.
Kevin Fryer's harpsichord. And then I did a third. Oh, I did that for a private commission that Kevin had, and it was all Bruegel. 4 different Bruegel paintings. And the bird trap, and it was the Ice Age in that century, 17th century, or 16th, maybe late 16th, but anyway. So all ice skaters everywhere. And the hunters coming in the snow with their dogs. And the man that fell through the ice, and he's going like this.
So you incorporated 4 different paintings?
Bruegel paintings.
Right. And so would you look at other harpsichord lids to get your inspiration, or did you just
Well,
kind of-
no, because they told me what they wanted in each case.
I see, so you just made it up.
And then when I started to do Hanukkah and David's harpsichord, Hanukkah, and I chose the images we like from 17th century Dutch painting. And then I incorporated them into an overall composition. And, you have to invent quite a lot around this and that. And that's how I got that painting. But I love it. And I love commissions. Some artists hate commissions. And I love them because I want to see if I can do it. They tell you do this and do that. And you don't know if you'll be able to do it or not. But I'm the one that has to make the composition work. And I like that too. So I have to tell them that sometimes. Because they don't have to make it work. They just have to choose the images.
Right.
So.
And I think you listen to a lot of music when you're painting, don't you?
I do. I like to listen to music. Nowadays, since I have such a fine Baroque musician in my family, as well as contemporary musicians and your sister, and mostly I listen to Baroque nowadays, because I didn't before. And when I was a singer and I sang Rejoice Greatly from the Messiah, it was about 4 times slower than the Baroque, which is infinitely superior. All that research, I think it really paid off.
Yeah.
With all those vertical aspect to it and spaces, and you can see the structure of the music much better. That's what I like.
Good.
Well, when she was, I don't know, when she was, say, 12 or 13, she could play a slow movement on the cello with great depth and feeling. And very few young ones, except all those prodigies, which thank God she wasn't, can do that when they're young. They just don't understand a slow movement. They understand lively and all that. And I'm listening, and her father's listening, and say, "Man, that's really beautiful, isn't And then another time, we go to one of her concerts with the young people, and she's playing a Brandenburg concerto. And I said to him, "Did you ever hear her practice that at home?" He goes, "Nope, never. I have not heard a Brandenburg at home." And she pretty much sight reading it. I thought that was pretty impressive. And she just got better and better, except when you went to college. And then you studied with a certain cellist at USC. And then after a year, I don't know who said it first, but I said, I don't think you made much progress this year. I was expecting a lot of progress because you were so good at it. Mm-hmm. And you said, no, I don't think that's the right teacher. And you shifted to another college. Mm-hmm. And there you had a teacher who really understood you. Mm-hmm. And you made huge progress. And you just kept on. But you also kept challenging yourself the whole time.
Mm-hmm. It's true.
And you keep on doing that, and that's very interesting. And your graduate recital was sensational. You did Beethoven, I don't know, maybe Hinestera or somebody else, with a good pianist, and it was fabulous. And then I get in the car with you afterwards, and you go, gosh, that was a lousy concert, and I just a crummy recital. I said, Tanya, what the hell are you talking about? It was fabulous. Just graduating from college, right? How old do you think you were? 21 or 20 or something?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. You and your friend, that girl, she was a great pianist.
Kendall Feeney.
So then I had to give you a little talk about how it was really good.
I just want to thank Voices of Music for doing all their great work of video and getting me together with my mom so we could do this fun interview.
Well, I'm very grateful too. In the first place, I loved making the harpsichord lid, and I just love the Voices of Music group, and it's really a terrific bunch of musicians. And they had featured you before in some virtuoso concert that was free, I believe. And then it turned out you couldn't play. And I thought, this is terrible. You said you had a contract. But then I was somewhere with you and you said, oh, no, that's a different date. I don't have a contract. I can play. I was so thrilled.
Oh, when they're going to feature you?
Yeah, because then it seems so fun if my daughter could play too. Mm-hmm. And they'll have nice harpsichordists, I imagine. And it's really exciting. I guess I'll bring some other paintings. I'm very grateful for that.